Good evening and a warm welcome back to the plenary session this evening. We now have the much anticipated fireside chat with Professor K. Vijay Raghavan about the emerging role of science and technology in India's growth. This conversation will be moderated by Mr. Rishabh Gulati, who is a television journalist and currently the managing editor of the national news channel NewsX, where he also serves as the principal prime time news anchor. He is the executive director of Global Youth, an organization that mentors young people, especially young women, in taking leadership roles and engaging with foreign strategic, economic, and social policy initiatives. He is also an alumnus of the Australia-India Youth Dialogue and the Asian Forum on Global Governance. Over to you, Mr. Gulati. Could I please request you to introduce Professor Vijay Raghavan and begin the fireside, please? Over to you.
Nabina ji, and to your entire team at the Nudge and all the large organizations that are supporting this fantastic 3-day charcha. Thanks very much for giving me the privilege to speak to an eminent person like Professor Vijay Raghavan. And you picked a topic that I know is really close to his heart, and he's bringing the academic and scientific capacity, and I bring in the curiosity and hopefully a chance for a TV journalist to keep silent for a change and listen. For those of you watching this on the Nudge live streaming platforms on AirMeet, and the rest of you watching live right now on NewsX, as you probably well know, Professor Vijay Raghavan is the principal scientific advisor to the government of India. He is the man who is helping bring some practical action on what science and technology has to offer us and how do we convert that into socioeconomic growth. In his background, which is multifarious, he by profession is a developmental geneticist and of course has been the former director of the National Center of Biological Sciences. His fields of specialization are biology, genetics, and neurogenetics. He helped set up the National Center for Biological Sciences in Bengaluru. That comes under the Tata Institute for Fundamental Research, TIFR. That was in 1992. He's also served as director of the National Center for Biological Sciences in Bengaluru and the secretary of Department of Biotech. Welcome, Professor. What a treat this is. Now, I mentioned this is a subject close to your heart. For those of us watching this on various platforms, Professor Vijay Raghavan, has been the front line at a time when we are realizing the value of the medical sciences, of engineering, of rapid prototyping, of achieving things. There was a time in India when we were building the best planned cities and discovering zero and looking out into space. But there was also a time in India when the same best planned cities were being used as ballast for the Kabul-Multan railway. And when an individual who wanted to set up a steel foundry in India was told that if the Indians could make steel, they would eat it. He did set up the largest steel foundry in Asia and then set up a town called Jamshedpur. Science and technology is crucial. Professor Vijay Raghavan, where are the areas, sir, that we should be focusing on in terms of industry, in terms of academia, in terms of our entire Team India approach when it comes to science and tech?
Thank you very much, Rishabh. It's a great pleasure to be here. And, this is really very, very interesting, but also strange times in terms of what science and technology can do. And the reason I say this is since the time when humans domesticated plants and animals, they were practicing science in multiple ways. That got formalized on scale at the start of the Industrial Revolution pretty much. And that resulted in the growth through multiple industrial revolutions of the world we see today. There are many exciting and positive things which have happened, and many things which have happened which need not or should not have happened and should have been avoided. It's really economics and politics which drives change in the world, and science and technology is the fulcrum on which social and economic change rests on. So it's a combination, this interaction which is there. Your question was, what can we do today in terms of science and technology in the country to change? Now, the answer would have been different if we had asked this 50 years ago, and the answer would have been different if we had asked this 2 years ago. 50 years ago, it was more about manufacturing, setting up capacity, having a combination of self-reliance and global connect. Then the digital world came about us, and that really has changed dramatically the way the economy drives. It's both e-commerce, the link between Internet of Things, all of that is important. And with the pandemic, we have completely broken global supply chains. New world orders are still likely to emerge, and we are going to have to reinvent many, many, many things. And that requires us to use all our learning to advantage to shape our lives and livelihood from water supply, agriculture, health, and so on. So these are doable because of the investment we've done in science and technology. So we've got new kinds of routes open now.
Professor, obviously, you've been seeing the past 18 months from a very, very micro and macro perspective. There were, I remember sitting, when we were still trying to figure out how we will make a test kit, how we will figure out how to make masks and sanitizers and PPE kits. 18 months, rapid R&D, prototyping and manufacturing at large scale. What are the lessons we've learned, sir?
The lessons we have learned comes from what society demands of industry and what industry demands of academia. These are three different trains which move at different speeds. Society and politics want solutions by the weekend. Industry wants solutions by the quarter. And science and technology deliver solutions by the years or decades. How does one have what is called in electrical engineering an impedance matching so that information and material can go between these three speeds? That is what we learned in the last 18 months. That there are many, many treasures in our science investment portfolio which we can rapidly move to industry, which we can rapidly move to application. So that's really something remarkable. We must continue to invest in basic science because that pays off in areas we don't know where the challenges will be, but we must continue to rapidly move to industry and to society.
There's a fascinating new trend happening, and I've been covering it as a journalist, like I said, out of passion and curiosity. For those of you watching, in the middle of the pandemic, we've come up with the draft space policy. InSpace is already working with 28 private sector players. Hopefully by, very soon we'll have a private sector rocket launch. The defense industry is ramping up. We're hosting a summit on hydrogen very, very shortly, and that's going to be very fascinating. So when it comes to industry, these industrial partnerships, Professor Vijayaraghavan, how do we encourage them? Where do you see the opportunity there?
What has happened with the space policy is a remarkable example, and that will actually start being implemented in other sectors. With space, we had till recently a structure where public funding went into pretty much every space launch. And then the satellites were used in the public sector dominantly. There were many, many private satellites launched, but they were not large in number or quality compared to what was launched globally. In space now is a new structure which will receive proposals for satellite launching, both from government and the private sector and from startups, and tell ISRO in an independent manner, these are the ones you should be launching, these are commercial, these are societal, and so on. So this really transforms ISRO into an R&D core and in space as a structure which decides on merit and on demand what needs to be launched. This is going to completely transform the space entrepreneurship and satellite launching sector. But that's not just that. If you look at the geospatial policy, that is completely opened up now, and that allows mapping and geospatial data, remote sensing data to be converted into value-added supplies which can be used across industry. That opens up a huge range. And that's not just that. You have the draft drone policy which is up and will be put out very soon, and that allows again collection of data in a huge way. So this is going to be really impactful on the health, agriculture, mining, environment, and commerce sector.
Okay, since you covered space, where are the replications? Because the defense is going the same way. But if you look beyond that, in biotech, in silicon, as setting a silicon manufacturing over here in India has become a huge deal. In artificial intelligence, what do we do? Do we approach it strategically, or do we just let some impetus for industry happen?
There's always the balance between ambition and what we can do, and balancing that with the reality of what the world around us is. It's, of course, very important that we should be adventurous and do multiple go into multiple areas. And I'll come to that. But it's also true that the rest of the world is not sitting idle. They're also trying to do innovative things. And, there's not just catching up, but there's strategic catching up to be done. So coming back to what we can do, very simply, what's happened both by design and by accident, Indians are at the core in industries such as the semiconductor industry, but also in manufacturing all over the world, contributing at a design edge. So, and design is becoming key in manufacturing everywhere. In other words, there are companies whose core focus is design and who have a distributed manufacturing system. Manufacturing is not unimportant by any means. Quality manufacturing is important, but you get manufacturing done from different companies. You design the composite, you design the whole network. That's what India is now embarking on in a big way, and that's India's strategic advantage.
Okay, the strategic advantage is that we have the one biggest asset to be Atmanirbhar on is brain power is here. Then it comes to design, and then it comes to prototyping, and then of course to implementation. But if you just pick some specific areas, and you mentioned space. Now, space is not just about rockets. Okay, it's about what happens when ISRO gets the satellite imagery. Who's going to apply the AI algorithm that's going to tell you which area is growing which crop, and which area is being more urbanized. So if there are young entrepreneurs out there, young people in college, and they're doing, listen, we're getting these troves of data which ISRO is now opening up. What are the areas that people should be looking at startups in utilizing this data?
There are simply stated two ways to do this. You can have solutions in search of problems and problems in search of solutions. So both of them are needed. And the solutions in search of problems is not a small thing. You can have extraordinary new technologies which come from the aggregation of multiple available technologies. So it's not just pie in the sky long-term research. And that can result in solutions to really complex problems, and they cut across multiple problems. Very simply, one category of such problems is the ability to sense the environment. So sensors are important. Analyze the aggregated data and feed back into decision making. What the kind of sensor is can vary, and that's the problem in search of a solution. If you're a farmer, it's soil quality. If you are interested in water supply, or in the demand end or the supply end, you could be in water supply companies or cities. And therefore, this is a very big opportunity. Till recently, these kinds of solutions were available through big, huge multinational companies. Today, there's a great opportunity for small companies to get these solutions and scale. One example of that, and it's not trivial, it's huge amount of technology investment over the years. One example recently is Tejas, a small company in Bangalore, is now partnering with Tata's in semiconductor technology in telecom. Absolutely stunning. I think they'll be world beaters with a combination of deep tech and marketing ability. And there are many, many such examples you're going to see.
So, those are hopefully big check marks on making indigenous 5G, even if all the R&D has not been done here. But 6G can be, and getting that, 6-7 nanometers silicon lab is going to be very, very important. It can be done. Professor, you've, been all over the world and had tenures both in academia and otherwise. At the very university level, how do we convert R&D happening there to prototyping, practical purpose, and having lots of companies to push this emerging out of our university setup?
This requires a combination of both tech capability and regulatory push. Let me give you an example. In terms of 5G, our scientists have worked not only to develop technologies for use of 5G in rural areas, but they've also worked with global regulatory bodies to make sure that they are accepted as standards. Once you accept something as a regulatory standard, then its market booms enormously. And that's what our scientists are learning in every sector. It's not just the product, whether it's old tech or old science being used in new ways or new science coming in. You have to ally to make sure it goes through the regulatory pipeline. Some of our scientists have got together and put in place 5GI, which stands on the global 5G regulation, but adds on I for India or innovation and new ways. So we're going to see new ways by which a combination of tech science and regulatory changes can put in place Indian science and technology into the national and global marketplace.
Professor, do we need economies of scale examples like what we did with LED bulbs, for example? What we're doing with solar right now, not just the solar mission, but what India is per se doing. Do we need particular examples to showcase to industry what can be done, or should it be more organic?
No, this is very interesting question in the time of global supply chain shakiness. The key to all the questions which you asked this time are the availability of energy, right? Now, how do you get solar energy to scale? Of course, you can put up solar panels and get solar energy, but where do the panels come from? How are they assembled? Where do the photovoltaic cells come from? So those back end have huge costs both in imports and on global environment. So we need to keep exploring energy sources which are both economically viable and not subject to market fluctuations. Those who supply you solar cells and panels and wafers and all of that, a slight tweak in the price can send your internal system into a complex phase, just like changes in oil price can. So it's very important that we are energy self-sufficient, not just in the use of renewable energy sources or nuclear or whatever, but also in their development over here. And that's happening.
Okay, and for people watching this broadcast, we are now actively looking for lithium. We already know that we can maybe do something with our thorium reserves, of which India has one of the largest in the world. So there are lots of potentials out there. So let me pick on one. One is big data. Professor Vijay Raghavan, when we're being told that this is the fifth industrial revolution and it's going to be data based, and AI is going to feed off that data and become smarter and smarter. There are patents being filed in this field by Indian researchers and companies, but not at the scale that the Americans and the Chinese are doing. What is your best hope there? What emerges in this field for us?
The Niti Aayog put out a national AI policy a couple of years ago. That's been translated into an AI mission, and that will be launched very, very soon. So that's the government lever, as it were, to the overall ecosystem. But well before that, the Department of Science and Technology has put in place a huge cyber physical system mission to allow the Internet of Things and such like activities scale, and that's going full pelt, just as a supercomputing mission is going on. So you're seeing, again, a very large broadening of the footprint of research and application work in these areas, and therefore you're going to see more and more of what I referred to earlier as solutions in search of a problem. Now, the solutions are enabled to access the problems because there's been separately a big push in the government to open up data use through data policy changes and bringing tech into ministries. So that's at the government end. But also at private sector, NASSCOM and other agencies have been pushing this in a big way. So I think all the building blocks are in place. We've gone through a phase of a early and late lag phase, and we're ready for exponential takeoff in this sector. And this will be distinctly different from AI use all over the world, because the Indian mantra is AI for society, right? And not just for industrial growth. So it's going to impact on agriculture, health, education, and energy on scale. And the training sets are going to be substantially Indian, and therefore its legitimate value in our ecosystem will also be much more.
Okay, and there's a time coming where data is no longer going to be measured in terabytes. I'm told at scale you have to measure it in megawatts because that's how much power it uses. But can you give us help us give us an example when we say this social AI or open AI from data sets? What are we looking at? I mean, how do we translate that into something? Is it going to then be an app for farmers, a satellite-based solution, a water management solution? Where do you see this going?
See, there are two different aspects here. There are, of course, lots of apps available for farmers, for engineers, for health workers, and so on. But they're not necessarily AI-driven. If you want to look at an AI-driven app which everyone uses, it's the map we use when we go from place A to place B or order something, and then an AI engine suggests more products and so on. So that's at the consumer level. Now, at the level of the, at health or agriculture, we need similar ease of using AI The apps, of course, are meaningful, but the backends really have to analyze the data really well. That is not yet taken off on that scale. So let's take health, for example. We now have extraordinary changes in health which have taken place. The National Digital Health Mission has taken off. All your health data is portable. You can put it through, no matter how rich or poor you are, you can store your health data in one location. So if you've done a set of tests in one location, you can access it in another location. You have e-pharmacy, you have, distance consultation, all of that possible. Now, where does AI come into this? AI comes into this when all the X-rays which are there all over the country, all the MRIs, they are anonymized, they are available for analysis, and therefore diagnostics becomes easier and easier for the doctor, and they can go to higher and higher levels of analysis rather than relatively routine stuff. Now, India has one ability, its one demonstrated ability is to put IT on scale, and India is not scared of doing that. And India doesn't have to learn from others. Others have to see Indian examples in the scaling aspect. There are many things we learn from each other, but scaling is something which Indian IT is really good at. So to AI for society, you're going to see our use of, in health, for example, our health data being anonymized and being valuable for us to get, as an individual, better service.
Okay, anonymized. And of course, the logic is that AI should be able to see your scan and give aid and suggestions to human doctors to help analyze it better. All of this has to be built in an architecture, Professor Raghavan, and in everything that we are sitting from, the microphone in front of me and the mobile phone and the laptop is eventually silicon based. How crucial is this going to be, having this ability not to assemble in India, but to make it in India?
There are two different aspects here. One is about functionality right away, next week, next month, few months from now. There, the overall network architecture is key. The design architecture of the systems are key. And there is the ability to assemble components which are got from elsewhere into the design in a manner where you're company agnostic and you can move components from one company or the other. In other words, the short term allows you to do the most complex in a manner where it's your design and your platform and you're agnostic to the source and you have only trusted sources. So this allows you to have security as well as high quality going forward in the next 1-2 years. Now, manufacturing is another big game. And we can go into that a little later, but that's very different.
So let me pick on this because we only got a few minutes left. Manufacturing, now that I don't think government is planning to go into mass scale manufacturing. We're not, 30, 40 years ago. So it's about industry partnerships. Now, how are we, there was a PPP model, which we've done in roadways, which is a different kind of, of infrastructural construction. When we're talking about high-tech manufacturing, is there a PPP model? Is there a government becomes a contractor model? Is it a tender model? Is it a competitive model? Where do you think we're going?
So the government in many sectors has encouraged deep tech manufacturing by having production-linked incentives of various kinds. So you come in and invest in battery storage, for example, electric cars, you get production-linked incentives. Now, that will scale up to some extent. A substantial requirement, though, is ecosystem development, testing facilities, ancillary facilities, use in other sectors. As that grows, and that grows initially through imports, that will also build up an ecosystem where manufacturing can come for chips, for example, in a big way. It will start with scaling up at the lower end of the chips, and that's fine for about 50, 60, 70% of what one needs in the IoT world.
Correct.
And then the higher end will happen. It has to be successful only if it can link immensely to the export market, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah, we are making progress in the general chips, which don't have to come down to 7 nanometers, which you can use for most of the activities, which are cheap chips. We're making progress there, and setups are already happening. Okay, so I have to ask you before we close this, AI specifically in your domain expertise and what you've been tracking in vaccine development and others. We saw the Koreans, apply AI to come up with alternatives. So in the medical field, other than just being predictive and doing data analysis, predictive AI actually coming up with models of vaccination. Do you see a huge future here, especially given the circumstances?
Yes, with a certain level of caution. In biology, if you use AI and modeling methods, you can go from tens of millions of possible solutions to thousands of possible solutions, or even hundreds of possible solutions. But since it's biology, these hundreds and thousands have to be tested out. So testing out on scale at the level of cells in the lab, model organisms, other animals, and in humans is also feasible. And this combination can greatly speed up the development of drugs and vaccines. I've lost your audio, Rishabh.
Yeah. So before I let you go, sir, the objective of this forum and the reason we are taking part of this telecast opportunities also is to come up with some kind of workable suggestions. So what would you suggest to both the participants here, the other speakers who are about to follow you, and we're getting people from NASSCOM and from the DRDO right after this with my colleague, and to our viewers, what would you suggest? What 2-3 things that you would recommend for us?
Well, I would narrow it down even to less than 2 or 3 to 1. See, the principal question we keep asking is, what use can science be, or what use can technology be for problems which I need to solve now? And that's something, of course, our science and technology enterprise must address. And it will address both by what it has and what it can scale. But if you want to go to the future, the one thing which we need to invest on in this data logic-driven world is teaching and training our population. 90% of our research goes to places where 10% of our students go. 90% of our students are not exposed to research. Therefore, creating structures, which we are doing, where research opportunities in mathematics, computer science, statistics, economics, history, biology, all of that is open to this 90%, will have a huge pool of talent which can deal with both known problems and unknown problems.
Well, Professor Vijay Raghavan, we've run out of time. I wish this conversation could go on, but the mission of the country does go on, and you have firm partners, sir. I know in the Nudge, they've been working with us for the past few months, and firm partners in us as a broadcasting platform. We do a lot on a weekly basis to figure out what ISRO is doing and what we can do on high tech. With that, it is a thanks, and back to Napina and Team Nudge to kick this off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Vijay Raghavan, for an enriching session. It's hard to believe that in 30 minutes we traversed such a wide array of themes, starting from industrial revolution to defense, space technologies, health, artificial intelligence. I think you've provoked us to think about these themes well beyond the session. Thank you, Mr. Gulati, for asking the questions that drew these very insightful responses across themes such as teaching, R&D, monetization of technologies, and achieving scale. Thank you both very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, Napina.
Good evening.
Take care, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Continuing with the same theme as the previous session, with the remarks that Vijay Raghavan, we now have a session on scientific growth in India's development. It was recorded earlier this week with Dr. Rajgopal, who is the early host as the speaker. Dr. Rajgopal is a distinguished scientist and the former director general of systems analysis and modeling at DRDO. She has received several grants as well as DRDO awards such as DRDO Scientist of the Year Award in the year 2010, High Energy Materials Society of India Award in 2016, Bharat Seva Ratan Gold Medal in 2015, the Best Citizen of India Gold Medal in 2015 by the Global Economic Progress Research Association. She has to her credit 53 international and 51 national publications with 4,285 citations. She has authored 3 book chapters and published 125 technical reports. She holds 12 patents to her credit. Debjani Ghosh is the NASSCOM president and the first woman at the helm of in its 3-decade history. As NASSCOM president, she actively works with the industry and government to accelerate the growth of the industry. She was instrumental in developing the Think Digital, Think India strategy aimed at establishing India as a hub for digital talent and innovation. In 2008, in January of 2018, she was felicitated by the President of India under the auspices of the First Ladies Program, which honors exceptional women pioneers in their respective fields. She has been honored by Vogue as the tech leader in the year 2020. She has also been listed among India's most powerful women in technology by Business Today. The discussion was moderated by Ms. Priya Sehgal, who is the Senior Executive Editor at NewsX. She anchors two analytical political shows called The Round Table and Cover Story. She has also worked at the Sunday, Outlook, and India Today magazines. She is also a political columnist for the Sunday Guardian. Let us listen to their perspective on the role of science and technology.
Well, and to take this conversation further, we have joining us, we have Chitra Rajgopal. She is the Director General at DRDO, and Devjani Ghosh. She is the President at NASSCOM. In fact, Devjani, I'd like to bring the first question to you because, today the topic really is, as we saw, role of science and technology in India's growth story. And my first question is, what is the role of science and technology in achieving India's sustainable development objectives?
Well, I'll put it this way. I do not think we can achieve our development objectives, be it sustainable, be it inclusive, without the role of science and technology. Science and technology has to lead the way, very simple. But that said, I think there's been a lot of talk about how the last 2 years, the pandemic, has been sort of the watershed moment for technology and how it's really brought out the role that technology can play as a force for good. I actually don't fully buy into that statement because I do believe that what the last 2 years has been a watershed moment of is human ingenuity and our ability to use technology, to use science to solve for some of these absolutely challenging problems, the life-threatening problems that we were faced with. And I think when we are talking about science and technology, we cannot leave out the human factor or the importance of the role of humans in making it happen, right? At the end of the day, technology is a tool. It's a neutral tool. It is neither good nor is it bad. It all depends on how we use it. And what we have seen in the last 2 years is when push comes to shove, we humans are tremendously capable of using the powers of technology to solve for some really big problems, be it development of vaccines or drugs to fight COVID, be it the entire deployment of vaccination strategies, remote healthcare management, contactless solutions, hybrid models. I mean, just technology is just being used in so many innovative ways. So yeah, it absolutely has the power, the potential today to be a major force for good. The question is, how capable are we humans to use it well, and how ready are we to use it as a force for good?
And that's a nice last question that she's ended with, Dr. Rajgopal. And also, if you can take it from there, and the important shifts that we made in terms of research, because that's really your strong point also. How has it changed our lives in terms of, especially in the lives of basic Indians, those at the bottom of the pyramid, and also the changes in a post-pandemic world, during the pandemic, how has that helped us? Dr. Rajgopal, that was for you.
Yeah, I lost you actually. There was a contact was lost for some time. So basically, I think you were asking me about the sustainable development, isn't it? So this term, I think we all know Brundtland Commission, 1987, as far back as that, we first used this term. And I think the way they defined it was very interesting. They say what meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, when we look at sustainability, it has got three main pillars: the economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. Now, if we look at anything for this, innovation is the key for this, for addressing all the sustainability issues. And the drivers for this are science and technology. And they are fundamental to the intelligent management and use of all our resources, environmental stewardship, economic development, and so on. Here we often hear of the term green technology. Here we use innovative ways to conserve natural environmental resources, minimizing and reducing the negative impacts of human activities. You would also have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. These are something which the countries of the world have enunciated. And what they said was that we aim to build a more prosperous, more equal, more secure world by the year 2030. And they came out with these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, out of which you would notice that number 9 talks of innovation specifically. So they themselves have recognized innovation as the key to achieving these Sustainable Development Goals. And India as such is going to play a very leading role in determining the success. Actually, we have made some green pledges. We have come out with this intended nationally determined contributions. We have said so much of solar energy, forest cover, so much of biomass, clean coal policies, wind energy. We made all these very, I would say, commitments which need to be met. And I think we are progressing ahead. But what I would like to bring out is, this is a problem which is complex, which has got a lot of uncertainties. You have a number of domains in this. So the traditional forms of thinking cannot work. Like Albert Einstein said, the significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. And if we cannot break out of these patterns of thinking, we cannot move to the higher level needed to solve sustainability problems. So these large complex systems, their behavior is so counterintuitive that it cannot be correctly understood without modeling the system's key feedback loops. And this is where we come to the need for systems thinking. This is basically getting a bigger picture, holistic thinking, pluralistic thinking, loop thinking, whatever you call it. So this, we understand the dynamic relationships or interactions between complex economic, environmental, social systems. And what are the consequences of these interventions, such as new policies, new technologies, new operating practices. So if I start off on this, I'll just talk off because this is something very close to my heart. So please do tell me at what point you would like me to stop. And
you said new technology. So quickly, before I get Devjani back in, the new technologies that have come up, say, in a post-COVID world, post-pandemic, or even, apart from, the vaccination, yes. But, apart from that, how else has technology helped us? What are the research that you're doing? Dr. Rajgopal, that's for you.
Okay. So one I told you was a systems approach and sustainable thinking in all research projects. The other thing is, this development of quantitative, qualitative models, rigorous methods for environmental performance indices and ranking methods, environmental risk assessment, risk acceptance criteria, database generation, AI, and IoT in waste management and transportation systems. These are the upcoming things. What we have already done in this area is come out with more efficient processes that minimize the production of waste materials, decrease the amount of non-renewable energy used, come out with site remediation, eco-friendly materials. And also we have come out with recycling of waste like PET wastes, introducing self-healing functionality. Also in the area of climate change mitigation, we have come out with clean fuels, hydrogen from carbon neutral sources. We have come out with halon alternatives for fire suppression. In addition to that, we also have training centers, skill building centers, capacity building centers. So these are some of the interventions we have carried out.
Can take my last question, and if you can also help in terms of innovations, in terms of technology, how do something that you can share with the viewers in the everyday lives, if you can show by example how science and tech in the last 2 years really, what are they, has come.
Yeah. See, I think I would like to.
Devjani, sorry, that was Devjani.
Dr. Rajkumar, if you want to continue
No, it's all
finish
right.
your statement.
It's perfectly all right. I've said whatever.
So the last 2 years, I think the focus of the scientific and of the technology community has been in the fight against COVID. And that's what all the focus has been for. And there, Priya, from just coming up with the drugs and vaccines that will help us fight the virus, to development of, the way remote healthcare has ramped thanks to technology. I mean, the kind of technologies that have now come up that will allow doctors to actually, without ever being in a room with the patient, to be able to detect what's going on, treat, it has been just amazing. Remote education, that's another place where we've seen tremendous innovation. A good way to track innovation also is to see where funding goes. And if it's raining funds in India right now. And if you track where funding is going, it's going into healthcare, it's going into education, it's going into BFSI, right? So these are the areas that have led for the front. There are a lot of contactless solutions that the world has, that the ecosystem has been innovating on, because even as we get vaccinated and as we start getting back to a part of, I won't say fully back to the life that it was, but at least we start creating the new norms, which is not being stuck up at home. I think the world is still going to be largely contactless. So contactless solutions are going to be playing a critical role. And I think as we have been doing this now, the conversations are shifting towards what's the next pandemic and when, and how do we get ready for it. And we all know that climate change is it's knocking on the doors right now. It's maybe it has already got a foot in. I think it's already, personally I feel it's already got a foot in, given what we are seeing happen in Greece, Turkey, frankly all around the world. So how do we solve for some of these problems? How do we solve for a greener, for a more sustainable planet? I think that's where a lot of the conversations are more. And one of the first things in there is reduction of carbon footprint. So as an industry, as a tech industry, it's no more a good to do. It's a must do, not for being a good corporate citizen, but it's a must do for business success. Because today, interestingly, global clients are demanding some of these changes in order to work with companies. So there's very interesting dynamics that's taking place, and I think heading towards the right direction.
Devjani, one more question. I was reading a lecture that you gave some time back, where you said when you look to the future, you also have to, not ignore the past, because the core foundations of the present are really laid in the past. That's when, really when the plumbing was set in, literally. So an example of that, in terms of artificial intelligence or the new technology that is coming in, and how we are taking a link from the past to build all this.
So I don't know if you're aware, but I'm sure Dr. Chitra is, but I think the scientists had predicted the pandemic like COVID, frankly, quite some time back. And there had been a detailed report in US that had been presented, etc., to say this is coming, this is happening. We didn't act, or we didn't act enough, right? So one key learning for me when you look back at the past is, sitting on data is criminal. And when you're talking about artificial intelligence is about how we leverage data, how we turn data into insights, into analytics and insights. And I guess the part that we have to talk about is, how do we train human beings to ensure that machines will do its job? Machines will do its job, give it good data, it'll come out with the insights. How do we ensure that we humans act on those insights in time? How do we ensure that, and I think that this is why I keep going back to it, and Dr. Chitra also referred to it as the thinking has to change. So when I look at the past, I honestly believe that majority of the focus right now has to be on building human capability, and it has to be on building that new mindset that will leverage the technologies to make the changes. Technology is neither the problem nor the solution. It's a tool, and it's there. It's there for us to use it.
Dr. Rajgopal, what are the systemic changes that are needed? We just had Professor Vijay Raghavan talking to my colleague Rishabh Gulati and he spoke that he's the principal scientific advisor, as you know, to the Prime Minister's office, and he says that he's very keen. They're very keen to bring in the private sector also. Have in terms of innovation, in terms of changes in participation. So, what are the systemic changes that you feel are necessary, needed to bring about this kind of innovation?
Yeah, I think what you said was very apt and correct. The private sector has to pitch in. And we have found that when we did an analysis of the various countries around the world who have really progressed and who are in the top few, the private sector contribution has been very high. And in India, it is just starting. We have, of course, the Make in India mission, where defense has been identified as one of the most promising sectors. And here we want that, 194 startups are already there, which are leveraging new age technologies to come up with solutions for the nation's defense security. And with the potential which we see, I think about 250 different startups over the next 5 years is what I think the government is targeting. Now, if you look at the R&D process itself, we generate the ideas, we refine the ideas, and then we do applied research. Basic research, applied research, development, innovation, and scaling. So in each one of these, there are different players. And the technology readiness level is something which we need to understand. Like, the ideation stage, we say technology readiness level is 0. And then basic research is 1, and so on and so forth. Finally, when we come to full commercial application, it is 9. So the 0 to 9 technology readiness level, the various stakeholders and players come in. And the problem here is the valley of death. That is the threat for defense innovators, where they are unable to access resources for prototyping, piloting, testing, market creation, and so forth. So it is at different stages that we need to fund them appropriately. That is, public funds may go in, or it could be from the private sector. It could be some kind of combination. It could be, venture capitalists, so on and so forth. So initially, funds to generate the knowledge and innovation, and then funds to advance the technology and develop the products, and finally to commercialize the products. So in DRDO also, the government has also been doing a lot. And in the DRDO also, we have various schemes. We have a number of directed research centers. We have research boards which do funding in the naval research area, armament research area, life sciences, aeronautics. We also have extramural research and IPR, contract for acquisition of services. And now we have come out with the Technology Development Fund scheme. Under this scheme, we fund small startups or industries so as to promote self-reliance in defense technology as part of the Make in India initiative. And this will build an ecosystem so that we have cutting-edge technology for defense manufacturing. In fact, the 15th Finance Commission made a host of recommendations also that covers the year starting from this year to 25-26. They have given a sort of in principle nod to setting up a non-lapsable modernization fund of 2.38 crores for a 5-year period for science, for defense and internal security. And they have given 4 sources of financing also. Now, all these initiatives and policy measures will certainly help strengthen the indigenous defense industry. So, and if we want to reach that 5 trillion economy goal, then this is a way forward.
Debjani, the same question to you too. What are the changes that you feel, the systemic changes that need to be made, and in terms of what help do you think the government can do to the private sector to encourage investments in science and technology?
So first and foremost is capability development, talent development. There is, while India has always had a strength with respect to STEM, with basic STEM, but in order for us to grow innovation, we have to go up the value chain. And I think that requires a different mindset, that requires different capabilities. And talent development to me has to be job one. Because if you don't have the talent, as I said, you cannot underestimate the role of humans in innovation. They are the ones who are driving it. Science and technology is not going to do it alone. So we have to build human capabilities and capacity. I think that to me is number one. And I honestly believe that has to be job one for the country across sectors. Second, when we are talking about innovation, and the government in India is one of the biggest buyers of innovation, users of innovation, because they take a lot of the solutions and then they roll it out into these massive schemes. I think we have to start looking at some of these very archaic laws and policies that we have in place, because technology has, say, changed so much. If you are going to look at this, follow the government policies of procurement, say, and try and procure solutions that are being developed, for example, in artificial intelligence or cloud, where you have to go for the lowest bidders, God help us. God help us. And I think this is where we have to completely disrupt some of these archaic laws and contemporize a lot of these policies in order for us to ensure that all the four wheels are moving forward together. You can't just say that I am going to grow the ecosystem, which is your startups and companies, etc., but you're not fixing any of the other issues. There is going to be a problem. So I think it's a holistic approach. Data sharing is another thing. India has a lot of data, but India suffers tremendously from the problem of a siloed approach, where government departments don't talk to each other or don't share data with each other. Now, things are changing, but is it changing fast enough? How do we create a holistic national data sharing policy in India? Because AI is powered by data. Technology is powered by data. And silo is one of the biggest enemies of innovation today in a data economy. So these are some of the top things that we have to get better at.
Literal terms, literally do away with all the red tapes. I think which are the different departmentization,
I'm not talking
the way a
so
government
much
normally works.
red tapes. I keep going back to this. We have to realize that the data economy, it's not even the digital economy, it's the data economy. The data economy, the rules of doing business, the rules of working are very different from the past. We have to ensure that our thinking, our policies, our processes keep up.
I'm going to before we end, I want to do highlight the gender edge that this panel has, really, so, and keeping that in mind, Dr. Rajgopal, how can we enhance the role of contribution of women in STEM, in terms of whether at the state level or the individual level? How do we encourage more women? We already have, both of you are prime examples of women at the top, but how do we encourage more participation?
See, first of all, let's look at the role of women in innovation. We talk of gendered innovation. Like, gender parity underlines the entire development process and is a key step in any kind of S&T-led solution to meet all our challenges of this century. So this involvement of women in scientific technological efforts today is essential if we have to have rapid economic development and sustainable development. Now, in the corporate sector, in the government, academia, and R&D, there's a growing realization of the importance and benefits of women in the workforce. Increasing diversity increases the creativity, productivity, and then in turn leads to greater innovation, which is very crucial in STEM and in the larger interests of scientific progress. However, there are some challenges. We know that women are only 14% in that 280,000 personnel in STEM in all our R&D institutions. And they are facing challenges which vary from their career profile. Early career, they face work-life balance, those kind of challenges. And then mid-career, women, many of them tend to drop out and they quote family commitments, household responsibilities, and sometimes they refuse challenging assignments just because of this. And they're trying to catch up time lost due to childcare. So here they've missed out on some age-bound recognitions. We have a number of recognitions like the Bhatnagar Award and so on and so forth, but they have an upper limit. So for women, many of them, you find very few Bhatnagar Awards, for example. And I think that one of the reasons is that age bar, that period in which their male colleagues have been sort of building up their professional repertoire, women have had to manage many other responsibilities. So that age bar needs to be increased. The second one is, memberships and all to associations, professional associations. A lot of old boys networks were there. Now there isn't a critical mass yet for a old girls network to evolve. So these informal kind of things are also very important. And that is where we need to build up networks. Networks, women who have reached mid-career or senior career levels need to network with upcoming researchers, women researchers, so that they can be encouraged and put on the right path. And then workplaces need to be gender sensitive. I don't know whether you know this, but for a long time, the women soldiers and the women combatants never had a full body protector designed for them. It is very recently that DRDO has come up with such a protector. So these are some of the things. And of course, in the late career, the ceiling, which we talk about. Yes. Of course, here, I would say that we have progressed a lot. In DRDO, for example, we have 30% women in the top management. And I think here, probably smart goals and smart assessments play a very important role, objective assessments.
Last word to you, Debjani, on the same topic,
I think Dr. Chitra has beautifully articulated a lot of the things that has to be done. I'll just say that the urgency levels have to change. See, this is the opportunity for us to recreate a better world, because COVID and the pandemic has forced us to press the pause button. So as we unpause, it'll be a shame if we go back to what used to be. We have the opportunity to, and we have the ability today, thanks to the progress in science and technology, we have the ability to create a better world. And we cannot have just one category of people creating that better world. I mean, therein lies the problem. We need to ensure, if we want to create an inclusive world, the creators themselves have to represent that world that we see or that world that we want. And to me, therefore, it is a must do for India. It is a must do. We don't have an option. Otherwise, we are going to create something that is an exact replica of the past. Let's not forget that. So then why waste the time and energy? So we have to ensure that, given the importance of this moment in time, given that we have that opportunity to rebuild together, we have to ensure that we have representation from every single sector and the right representation to rebuild. So that's going to be very, very important. I completely agree with everything that Dr. Chitra said. And on a lighter note, maybe we need to do a massive national campaign that tells men that it's perfectly okay to cook and look after your homes too. It's all about how you change your thinking. I don't buy that just because that's how we've been brought up. We are never going to change. Rubbish. We will have to change, right? So maybe we need to innovatively start thinking about bringing about some of these mindset changes.
On that note, thank you both for this conversation, which I really enjoyed. And as Debjani said, I think we be the change, and the role of science and technology in the India's growth story. I think women have a big role to play and a very influential role also, as we've seen, in fact, from the panel itself. Thank you so much for joining in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
A big thank you to our panelists, Dr. Chitra Rajgopal, Ms. Debjani Ghosh, and also Ms. Sehgal for moderating the session. Thank you all, those of you in the audience. Thank you for attending the closing session for the day. Look forward to seeing all of you at the opening plenary session tomorrow morning, titled Accelerating India's Transition to a New Economy at 9 a.m. Good evening. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.